Hey everyone, now that we've gone over grouping and hopefully you have at least a semi-okay, maybe struggling a little bit grasp of what grouping is and what it does, we're going to look at another clause related to grouping called the halving clause. The halving clause has a very specific need in that it allows us to restrict which groupings that we get in the result. Like we use the where clause to restrict which records we get from the data when we perform a select, if we don't want it to give us everything, we use the where clause to tell it which records we want and which ones we don't. Well, the halving clause is a where clause for aggregate functions, for grouped information. So what it does is it allows us to restrict the records returned by group by. And what I usually refer to it as, to make it a little simpler, is that it is a, it is a where clause for aggregate functions. And where it goes is directly after the group by clause. So let's have an example. I want to know how many items were ordered for each order. And it's not count, since there's a quantity field. We want it to actually total up the quantity. And just for example, what I'm looking at here is, this is order 1000. It has 2 items, each with 1 quantity. So the total items ordered is 2. Order 2000 has 2 records, but 6 items ordered. So that's the quantity I want. So I want select order number, and then the sum of their quantity, how many items were ordered in each order from order item, since that's the table it comes from. Group by, because we're wanting to group it by the orders. So group by order number. So if I run it, it should tell me how many items were ordered in each one. Now, this works well, but let's say your boss tells you, business is really slumping. I want you to look through the data and tell me which of our orders exist where people ordered a lot of things, and I want you to tell me which orders those were. Well, we can look at the group data and see, okay, well, order 2000, 3000 had a fair amount of orders, so what was in those? But again, this is a small data set. If you were to run this kind of query for, say, Amazon, you would never get through something like this. And if you had to do it by hand, I mean, if it were me, I'd probably quit. But again, there's another way to make SQL tell you that information. Now, what you would say if you were thinking about it that way is where some quantity is greater than 4. More than 4 items is a big order. We'll set that as our threshold. Well, if we try to run this, it'll tell us no. You cannot use aggregate functions in the where clause. The halving clause specifically exists for this need. So instead of where, I say halving. It groups the order number, and I want it to only show me the groups that have a total quantity of greater than 4. So if I run it, it excluded order 1000 because it only had 2 items. It still totaled it up, but it didn't show it to me because the halving clause told it I didn't want to see that one. So that's what the halving clause is for, and it's important that you understand the distinction. Where is when you want to filter individual records. Halving is when you want to filter out the groups. So moving on, and in the next lesson we're going to get into the true power of SQL.